So today we're talking about giving and receiving in tantric sex. And this talk is based in the tantric teachings that I share. But if you're new to this whole idea, even about tantric intimacy or connection and how we redefine love and how this giving and receiving works, I do recommend checking out my books, Tantric Intimacy and The Divine Union of the Masculine and Feminine. These are a deeper dive. Today, we're going to talk specifically about giving and receiving in tantric sex. But there's a whole lot more great, wonderful rabbit holes to go into if you'd like. So giving and receiving, these are two polarities or two sides of a polarity that allow us to actually come together and feel connected. So in divine union, in the masculine and feminine, there's giving and receiving, there's structuring chaos, there's protecting and vulnerability and all those kind of things, doing and being, inspiration and manifestation, all these wonderful polarities of the masculine and feminine that when brought together will bring us union in a way that all duality disappears and we actually experience oneness together. And this is one of the most beautiful things we can do in tantric intimacy. We can do it in relationships with friends. We can have beautiful bonds with our children and family and colleagues and all kinds of things. We can have these wonderful bonds. But what's possible within an erotic connection, within a really romantic, beautiful, dynamic, magnetic connection is really something special. And so when we bring these dynamics into intimacy, we get to sort of go into brand new places. So giving and receiving is one of those dynamics, and it's one of the main ones. So the primary giving and receiving that we're going to talk about, giving being touch, and receiving, of course, being receiving that touch, which isn't doing nothing. And it's really important to know that because in the world that we've lived within, this patriarchy, this domination paradigm, this separation paradigm, the feminine was sort of believed to be nothing, useless, empty, nothing. The masculine was everything, right? The masculine is all that mattered. The intellect is more important than the feelings. Who's giving? Well, they're the ones doing something, right? And this comes up a lot in giving and receiving in relationships when we're coming out of this separation paradigm and maybe we have pain or injury from the past. Very often someone might say, well, how come I'm the one giving? How come I'm the only one doing something? And this is something just to keep in mind as we're discussing giving and receiving, that receiving isn't doing nothing. The person receiving the touch is actually the game board, right? That's actually where everything is happening. This is the medium for all energetic transfer, all orgasm, everything actually happens in the feminine. And it's in the union that both experience it together. So I just want to set that up because sometimes we have this idea that the one receiving is just lying there, and it's not true. So let's talk about touch and caress in intimacy. Imagine you have two entities that are separate, right? They are whole, complete beings unto themselves. The one in the masculine reaches over and gently touches the other. This is initiating a connection. And now imagine that we are energetic beings. We're not just two balls bouncing into each other. This is an energetic initiatory contact. And so when the masculine touches the feminine, if the feminine desires it, which is really important, if the feminine desires it, she, and I'm going to say she, but I just mean the feminine. This could be same-sex partners, but it's just easier to say he and she just to represent masculine and feminine, not gender. Feminine partner then releases starts to drop her guards to receive this touch. Because to remember that we begin as complete entities. I, right now, am a complete masculine and feminine whole. Like this yin yang symbol, this moving, dynamic, beautiful symbol. I am that right now, right? I am whole and complete in and myself, experiencing my own bliss state, perhaps, or not. But I am whole. And now someone comes along and they begin to touch my wholeness. Well, if I choose to interact with them, then it's almost like my yin yang symbol begins to release its bonds. I begin to actually open up to this other person. And this is the beginning. So not only are they touching, I'm also opening up to them, right? But this is only because I desire it, right? All tantric intimacy exists within a loving connection. And even if you're just dating, maybe you're just dating and you've just met this person, but things are sort of rolling along nicely, and you think, well, at some point, I need to be in the masculine, if you're the masculine partner, and I need to initiate contact, right? Well, you're going to feel out the connection. Are you feeling comfortable? Do you feel like they feel comfortable? Have they been giving any signs that maybe touch is an okay thing? And then maybe you just begin on the hand, and they either, if they pull away, well, then you know. But if they relax and it's warm, then you continue. All tantric connection happens within actual connection, energetic connection, not side by side connection, not made up in our head connection, true connection. So everything we're going to talk about assumes genuine energetic connection. And that's really, really important to know. So now the feminine starts to receive this touch. Now, this is no small thing. You know, they talk about how all things in the universe begin with vibration. And this is a real passion of mine right now. This is my magic bookshelf behind me, filled with all of these wonderful books about the ancient roots of Tantra that were donated to me completely spontaneously by someone who followed me on Insight Timer. And one of the things that they talk about, of course, is this sort of creation of the world and how all the world was created by sound. And this is particularly interesting to me because normally you go, yeah, sound, the word of God, Shabbat, whatever, however you want to call that initial sound, the sound of Om. How does the sound Om create life? How does that happen, right? Trust me, this has something to do with touch. Well, lately I've been finding these videos on YouTube of these experiments people do where they take a speaker and then they put a metal plate on the speaker. Then they put white sand on the metal plate. And then they have the speaker hooked up to a synthesizer or various things that make sound. They hit a certain note and the sand creates form. The sand will go into a circle. The sand will go into a star. Some notes don't do anything with the sand, but other notes, they hit that note and they always create these beautiful geometric formations. Why is that interesting? And why would tantric paths be interested in that? Well, now let's imagine atomic theory. Let's just imagine this for a moment. We think in atomic theory that we are made up of atoms that are made up of charged particles filled with electrons and neutrons and protons and things. And we believe in our current theory that they're all held together by magnetism. Well, if all of these ancient cultures believed that we actually are created by a sound vibration, which of course goes back to Tesla's work and all kinds of interesting things, Nikola Tesla, not the car company. And now imagine that this is true. Imagine that sound, that there is a vibration in the world that is organizing the atoms in the ethers or in the quantum field Just like those speakers are affecting those sand particles and creating patterns. What if I have a very specific vibrational signature, which is why my sand particles look like this? Now we can go into that deep rabbit hole, which is my current joy right now, is diving into that rabbit hole of creation and sound and vibration and Tantra. But now let's imagine this in touch. So I have a vibration, my body has a vibration, my thoughts have a vibration, my loving intention has a vibration. So now, when that hand comes over to touch the other, what's happening? Everything is a vibration. When I even move the air towards, I am creating vibration in the field. When I touch and I run my hand across my lover's skin, I am creating vibration in the body. There is something really powerful about owning what is happening, owning how divine we are. So that when I am actually touching another being, that I am actually creating a vibration in their body. I am merging my vibration with them, my divine vibration with their divine vibration. Now imagine the person receiving this. So now I'm not just like opening my body and letting down my guards. I'm actually releasing whatever gets in the way of me merging with this other beautiful vibration that is now interacting with me. This is no small thing, because without me releasing that and opening my vibrational channels to their vibrational channels, we cannot merge. And this is why the loving connection is so important if we want to have tantric intimacy, tantric sex, if we really want to know where this is going to go. Which, of course, is why the tantric path is such a personal path. It's such an individual path first, or at the same time as being in a relationship. But it is for us to clear our minds and really connect with ourselves, right? So that we can really merge that way. So now imagine as the feminine that I want to receive the touch of this divine being. I want to receive the vibration. I want to receive this powerful energy, this thunderbolt, the rain coming on to Mother Earth. And as I open to that, I expand, right? The receiver expands. And again, I'm talking about sex, right? But I'm not also. The thing about Tantra is we experience it in sex, but let's say right now you don't have a sexual partner, right? Maybe that's the situation right now. Well, then you imagine the feeling, like put yourself in the vibration of Mother Earth, receiving the rain, receiving the sun on the crops, receiving thunder and lightning. And that is very erotic, right? But we'll come back to sex. This could be in the form of kissing, right? This could be lips, not just fingers or the body, right? Kissing is a very interesting part of intimacy. Barry Long was this wonderful Tantra teacher decades ago. He wrote a book called Making Love, and he has a wonderful audiobook if you can find it. He has the most beautiful accent, which I love listening to him. But he used to talk about how, for example, when we're kissing, that the tongue is like a penis or a finger or a vajra. That if you stick your tongue into someone's mouth, you are entering them in the same way that a penis or a toy or a finger enters another being. So you don't want to do that until the feminine desires it. And this is very, very, very important, because the feminine is the one being entered. And until the feminine desires to be entered, the masculine doesn't enter out of sheer respect and love, right? You don't barge into someone's house. You knock on the door. Maybe they talk with you over the threshold for a while. And then at some point they say, "Do you want to come in?" And they open the door and you walk in. This is the same in sex. This is the same in tantric intimacy. You don't barge into the feminine, whether it's with a penis, with toys, with fingers, or with the tongue. So when you kiss, and I know it seems funny to talk about kissing as adults, but it's really important. Because even for a lot of people who maybe even have been married for decades, if you're around my age, and then you find yourself single, you maybe only kissed one person in 2 or 3 decades. And all of a sudden you're out in the single land going, I don't even know if I am a good kisser. Right? But the key is to always be gentle, to always be aware of the consciousness of the lips, to be conscious that there's fluid, that you're mixing liquid and skin and all that, like to really be clear of what you're doing, and then just being very gentle. And then you can sort of tease and see, and if the feminine opens her mouth, if she opens it, then that's an indication that maybe a bit of tongue goes in. But it's always in connection, right? It's always in connection with the feminine. And we read her, right? We read the feminine always. And again, the feminine has to be honest, right? We come from decades and decades, generations of women faking orgasm, faking that they desire it, allowing men to do whatever they want because, oh, we want them to feel like men, and especially sexually, we don't want to emasculate them. So I'll just let them do whatever. This is us treating the feminine as nothing, as empty, as irrelevant. The feminine is the rich landscape of lovemaking. So when the masculine comes to you, you must be honest. And it sounds funny to have to say, but if we actually don't feel like kissing with tongue, or maybe we don't even feel like kissing, then we have to be honest and kindness always, to say, I don't know why, but I just don't feel like that right now. Or just shift the lovemaking to something else for a little while or something, right? But kissing is a huge deal. In fact, kissing is such a big deal. Whenever I work with partners, you always know if the relationship is over because they don't like kissing anymore, right? That's why even in dating, to me, when you're dating, if you kiss the person and there's a joy in the kissing, then you know there's a joy in the rest. But if there's no joy in the kissing, the kiss, it's sort of I have Cher singing in my head now. It's all about the kiss. Or is that how it goes? It's all in the kiss or something. And it's so true. Kissing is a huge thing, and it's just really, really important to be aware of that. So along that line of the entering of the feminine, of course, the next step is to talk about vajra, lingam, penis, whatever you want to call it. Now, if you are in a same-sex relationship, I'm not sure how this works exactly with toys. I mean, obviously there's an honoring and there's a kindness and all that kind of thing, or fingers. But I'm going to specifically talk about the vajra yoni connection here. And there's lots of things that can be expanded into same-sex couples for sure. But the vajra and yoni, these are two words. The yoni is interesting because the word yoni doesn't just mean vagina. It actually means the entire being. Because again, very often the feminine is it's just seen as a cylinder to be pounded by a penis, right? Nothing, not important. So it doesn't really matter how you do it or whatever. Unfortunately, all that tends to matter is that it's tight. Because, of course, in procreative sex, as opposed to tantric intimacy, in procreative sex, it's just about ejaculation. So you just have to have a tight vagina, and you just are going to like pound at it until the masculine ejaculates. And then maybe if you're lucky, you figure out how the women can have an orgasm as well. Sometimes women can have orgasms in actual pounding sex. That can happen. But that is why the vagina is the only focus, and it just has to be tight, almost like virginal. It's a whole kind of weird thing, right? But the interesting thing is, this is not the ideal situation for anybody. A tight vagina is actually very limited because it's actually tense, right? And I'm not talking about virgin or someone young having sex. Obviously, it's going to begin that way. But what's really, really interesting is imagine instead that the feminine is something, not just an empty cylinder. The feminine is this alive being that you are entering, right? It'd be almost like, in the land of things I can't say on Insight Timer, it'd be almost like giving head, right? That you could just sort of treat a mouth like that. But if the mouth actually uses the tongue and uses kissing and using all these things, suddenly it's a very different thing. That the mouth is actually doing this to the vajra, right? Well, it's the same thing with actual lovemaking with a woman, right? Because what happens is, first of all, in the polarities of the body, the female, the positive polarity is the heart, and the negative polarity is the yoni. And it's swapped in the male, right? The positive polarity is the penis, and the negative polarity is the heart. So the male receives through the heart and gives through the vajra. And so the female receives through the heart, or receives through the yoni and gives through the heart, right? And again, that's a whole other discussion. But for this particular context, when the female receives through the yoni and wants to be in that negative pole, right? Imagine a magnet, the positive pole, negative pole, it must relax. And I remember when I first discovered this, I had gone away with my ex-husband, and we had gone to Jamaica. And I really wanted to play with tantric intimacy. So we said, okay, for 1 week, we're not going to do any ejaculation or chasing the orgasm or anything like that. And we're going to play in this polarity and just see what happens. Because the thing about this is, like, here we're sort of talking about it intellectually, but the key is to sort of have the ideas in our head and then to release all the ideas and just go play. Because it's a greater world out there than anything our brain can come up with, and we need to be free to explore. So this is what we did. And what was really interesting is I would say be on top. And I would try to think, how do I become a negative pole in the yoni? How do I do that? And I realized I had to relax. And after, at this point, probably 15 years or longer of trying to be tight for sex, it was actually quite a thing to relax my yoni inside. It was almost like I had to systematically, like, okay, release that muscle, release that muscle, release that muscle, like kind of keep releasing, right? And as they kept releasing, I would cry. All these emotions were coming up. And I was just like, and I had no idea. It wasn't like stories were coming up or trauma was coming up or anything like that. It was almost just all of these pent up emotions locked into the walls of my yoni were suddenly able to be free, right? It's like, I remember when I was a teenager, I took Taekwondo, and they would teach you how to tense your stomach muscles to take a hit. Well, and that's what happens. If you're always having pounding sex, you learn really quickly how to tense those muscles, not only to be tight, but to take a hit, because that's what's happening, right? Well, now imagine even in your stomach muscles. Think of all the organs in your stomach, in the torso, the liver, the kidneys, the stomach, the intestines, everything. And you're always tensing them to take a hit. And then all of a sudden, one day, you relax all those muscles. And all the organs connected to those nerve endings relax. Well, this is what happens in our yoni. It actually relaxes. And all of a sudden, whatever stored emotions, fears, pain, trauma, they all come flooding out. And so luckily, my husband, he was a good guy. And so he just sort of allowed it, and he realized that this was a healing. These were healing tears, and it was all good. And that happened for about 3 days. That every time we made love, I would become really emotional. We would still make love. Like, it's not like we just stopped. And sometimes we would stop, but most of the time we just continued because I kind of wanted to keep digging into it. Like, whatever it was, I trusted him, and it was a safe bubble. And so I wanted to keep healing and keep healing. And then about on day 4, I didn't cry anymore. My yoni was easily open. And now all of a sudden, the weirdest thing happened. She was completely open and relaxed. And then, so now, of course, realize I'm no longer pretending I'm like a tight virgin or something. The yoni, at this point too, I had had babies. I'd never had vaginal births, but the yoni can actually stretch big enough to birth a child, right? And so it's not meant to be this tight little thing. What was crazy is we were making love, and then all of a sudden, the yoni reached down. I swear I didn't do it. And it was almost like a magnetic pull, right? Because she was in the full negative magnetism, and it sucked the vajra right into her. And it was like inside here, clasped onto the head of the penis and held it. But it was like it was holding it way up here. And then the walls of the vagina started doing this to the penis. For me, the sensation was just like, you imagine if you're a woman, the sensation of your very core, the most vulnerable part of you, being so relaxed that it was doing this like an octopus. And now you're relaxed. So this sensation of pleasure is moving through your whole nervous system, right from your root chakra. You know, this is this orgasmic state idea, as opposed to chasing like a clitoral orgasm or something like that. Nothing wrong with a clitoral orgasm, but there's more, basically. And so I'm doing this. My husband is like, what is this? Like, and his eyes just like do this. And he's like, and he's like, what is it? I don't know. So we just sort of relaxed into it and just sort of had it happen. But of course, he kind of had to keep his wits about him. So in the back to the whole giving and receiving, he had to kind of come to himself and actually just allow energy to flow through him into me. We weren't pounding. There was no movement like this. He was just in, and I was now literally receiving. Like I was, yes, like come to me. Like it was this thing. And you can read about this in ancient texts, about the feminine pumping the penis and all this. And here's a crazy thing too. When you experience this kind of intimacy like that, when the vagina will actually do this, the penis becomes bigger. And it's not just an anomaly. Like it's not just like it happens like once or twice. It gets bigger and thicker. Like the guys, it's so funny. Afterwards, they'll say things like, I've never been so hard before. Or why am I so thick? It's like they're just like, I don't understand. And I didn't understand it either because it happened all the time, like especially when I was single and I had different partners and stuff. And until one day I was in a sex shop and I saw this penis enlarger. And what was it? It was a vacuum, right? Well, we're designed to be vacuums, to actually do this and make it even bigger. So it's just a bizarre kind of side note on when we actually become that negative polarity, things happen that you can't even fathom. I used to joke about the fact that I was going to like teach people how to enlarge their partner's penises or something. But I figured the goal itself would actually ruin the whole potential of it. So never did that. But so this is the power of the feminine receiving with the yoni. It is so much more than just allowing a penis to go in and out, right? It's so much more. It actually is alive. It is a landscape to be explored. The other interesting thing I want to say just about the feminine receiving, and this is just my belief. I don't have anything to explain this or to justify this. But I believe that the uterus is a portal. And this is kind of crazy. I get it. But I remember one time years ago, I had anemia and I was in the hospital and they were doing all these tests to try to figure out why there was all this heavy bleeding. And at one point they went up inside my uterus and scraped the inside of the uterus. And the pain I had in my mind was otherworldly. Like it wasn't human. And that's when I started wondering, I wonder if the uterus is more than we think. I wonder if, we don't really know where life comes from, right? All we know is that eggs appear, it grows in the uterus, but where does the actual life come from? Does it come from where? Heaven? Galaxies? Where does that life come from? Why is it within the feminine, the female, right? Anyway, I think there's something powerful about that. And whether you've had a hysterectomy or not, and there's no uterus, energetically, it's still there. So I think there's something else really divine and sacred about being entered in this way, in a very conscious way. And so the receiving, when you enter into that state, I think really magical things are possible. So now let's go back to the vajra, the masculine. Vajra means thunderbolt in Sanskrit. So this is a beautiful metaphor for making love with a vajra, right? That it's an energy source. It's a plug in to a socket, right? And once you plug into that socket, the energy flows through you from your divine self into your partner. It's an energy source, right? And this doesn't mean that you can never have monkey sex and wild and crazy, horny, banging sex and all that. All of this exists within lovemaking. It doesn't all have to be slow, connected, my friends, when I talk about this, they call it octopussy. It doesn't all have to be like that. It can be anything, and all of it has a place. Okay. But unfortunately, we default to that procreative banging model. So that's why I tend to focus on other aspects, but it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. But to really be aware of that energy. So one of the interesting things about the vajra is, if you enjoy touching vajras, you can always tell if the vajra is kind of just hard in the moment. Like, let's say you're making love and the vajra isn't really getting hard on its own and you kind of play with it to make it get hard. It's almost like the shaft of the penis becomes hard. But when the man desires it, when it's actually coming from inside of them, when they actually deeply desire this, the base of the vajra becomes this powerful something, right? And it's so interesting to me because for me as a woman, sure, like foreplay and, dinners and flowers and stuff maybe really get the ball rolling. But there's something about if I go down and I touch that base and the base has energy, instantly it's like that energy goes into my fingers and it's like, oh, there's power here. And this is where like size is irrelevant and all that nonsense. It's the power at the base that matters. This is really, really important because that power fills the vajra, right? And then when you have intercourse, when that base connects with the base of the yoni, and what I mean by that is not the inside of the yoni, but the outside of the yoni. So when you look at a yoni, we look at the clitoris at the top, right? But the clitoris actually is an entire system that actually runs underneath the labia. It's an entire system that actually runs up into the rest of the yoni. It's not just on the outside there. So when that's actually when you've been making love for a while and you do pounding sex, you're actually stimulating that whole system. You're sending vibrations into her because you're stimulating that whole base of the clitoral system. But again, that only works if you're already super aroused and connected. But when you press in, and that powerful base of the vajra presses in to that clitoral system, you have now like connected energy sources together. And that's why when those connect and then she holds on the inside, this is why tantric intimacy can happen where you actually are not even going in and out at all. You're just in. And that base is connected to the clitoral system. That inside is way up inside the vagina, and energy is transferring in between. Practically, you come to this through play. It isn't that you're like, okay, this time we're going to do this tantric thing where I'm going to connect the base with your clitoral. Like, it's not like that. You play, you make love, you touch, you kiss, you enter when it's time. You do all that and you enter, and maybe you do go in and out for a while. Maybe you play, maybe you do whatever. And then all of a sudden there'll be a moment that specifically the female partner will be like, stay in now and press. She will know, right? They will know. So you're going to press in, and it's almost like you like click into place, and you can still like touch and feel and play and kiss and everything. And then the hips kind of rock together, right? The energy then flows that way. But the male partner still has this feeling of giving, right? They are giving with that core. And it's so powerful for them to actually feel the energy flowing in and flowing in. And this is where the polarity is really interesting. And you don't want to get in your head about it when you're actually making love. But if you were to imagine that energy is going into your partner, and they say, maybe it comes through the heart chakra, but what it really feels like for me is that it goes into the feminine, and it's almost like it lights her up, and she almost encapsulates you. Like it's like you are building the aura of the female, and that just sucks you in, and it creates greater magnetism between the two people, and the energy just keeps flowing. It's so incredible. This is where it's also really important to make sure that you're actually present, that everybody's actually present. And what are you thinking about? I recently wrote an article. I have a Substack publication called Tantra, Erotica, and Ancient Sexuality. And I wrote an article in there recently called What is Your Vajra Thinking? And because what's really interesting is when you, as the male, when you're all in, the female partner or the feminine partner in a gay relationship, they can feel your thoughts. And the second your thoughts stray to a fear, to a future moment, oh, I think I'm going to do this next. Even if you're still thinking about the sex, but you're actually not present, you're thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to do oral sex next or something. And you're thinking, the energy leaves the penis. That flow is gone because your thoughts are the energy also. So it's really, really, really important to practice being present. This is why meditation or whatever you need to do to practice focus is so important, to stay present with your partner. Same with the feminine partner. You have to be there. If you're off and about, none of this magic happens, right? We have to act. It's the power of two divine beings focusing all their energy on each other and then allowing energy to circulate between them. That's the power. And the last thing I want to mention before I put my glasses on is this idea of ejaculation or not. Because, this is a huge thing we hear about in tantric teachings that, for the men to refrain from ejaculation. So the first reason to do this, and it's not that you always have to refrain from ejaculation. it can feel lovely for both people, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's not anti-tantric, right? But one of the first very, very practical reasons to get over this, and this is for all couples, actually, regardless of whether there's a vajra involved or not, it's a very interesting practice to not chase orgasm. Because we've been trained in the procreative model that orgasm is the goal. And this doesn't matter whether it's two women, two men, man and a woman, it doesn't matter, right? Orgasm is the goal, and everything goes to that point. So what if you took it off the board completely, right? All orientations, just take it off. The first question often becomes, well, why are we bothering then? Like, isn't that the point? So that's the first philosophical discussion we have to have together. Is that the only reason we're doing it? And if it is the only reason we're doing it, then it can stay on the board. You get each other off and everybody's happy, right? But if you want to have tantric sex, if you want to experience a deeper love, a deeper connection, then that's the point. The deeper love, the deeper connection. You want to have an out-of-body or an out-of-body, in-of-body, whatever you want to call it, but you want to have an expansive, energetic, orgasmic state, then you can't be chasing these tiny little orgasms, right? Because they are tiny compared to what's possible. This is why we recommend initially to take ejaculation off the table. One, we do learn that ejaculation and orgasm are two separate things. You can, as a man, you can fully have many, many, many orgasms. They sometimes call them injaculations. You can have many orgasms without ejaculating, and you can ejaculate without orgasm. They're actually separate. It's just in procreative sex, we kind of build them up together for the power to ejaculate. But instead, you focus on the giving of energy, right? You are energizing Mother Earth. This is what you're doing. And when you take that off the table, you discover the touch. You discover everything else. And on a very practical level, you are now master of your body. You decide when you want to ejaculate or don't. And if you're like, well, I don't want to ejaculate right now, like you want to have as much control here as you do of your arm, right? Like, oh, I'm sorry I hit you. My hand's just so out of control all the time. Like, we wouldn't think that was normal any more than we think it's normal that our penis is out of control, that I can't control what it does. Of course I can control it. We just have never developed that ability, right? So then all of a sudden you can control it. So now you can make love for hours. It doesn't just have this huge, climb, jump off the mountain and you're done. You actually get to go longer. And there's also something that shifts inside the man when you are giving yourself to your partner. It's not about just ejaculating and I'm giving you my sperm. I'm giving you me. And that is a wonderful thing. And it's really wonderful to give yourself to someone and have that person fully receive yourself. On a secular level, on a very simple level, how beautiful is it to be received like that? And how wonderful is it to give all of yourself to someone? And when you can really play with that and master that, then you know what? Maybe you choose to ejaculate because maybe you want to have babies, or maybe it just feels wonderful, or maybe both of you really want that. Awesome, right? But the key is to know that there's more than just that. It's almost like that's literally the tip of the iceberg. So you have to kind of remove the tip so that you can actually experience the rest, right? So how do you get started playing in this giving and receiving? We have to just communicate with each other. We never assume, if you're in the feminine, that the person you're with knows how to give. Maybe this is all brand new, this connected giving. So maybe it's kind of nice to be able to say, would you mind just rubbing my shoulder? Sure, I'd love to. Oh, would you mind just touching me really lightly right here? And you're not telling them what to do. This is just communicating what is your body wanting right now. And then with every time you make love, the person giving knows how to give, right? And maybe the person receiving is having a hard time. Maybe they've had a lot of trauma and a lot of rough sex and a lot of bad handling. And maybe communication is needed there too, where the giver says, are you okay? Is there something that's easier? Like, I don't, no, it's okay. I just, or maybe this is better and I'm just feeling really emotional. Do you want me to stop? No, it's okay. We'll just keep going with it and let's try to heal it, right? This communication is absolutely necessary, right? Just open, loving, kind communication. And then we just figure it out, right? And then bit by bit. And it doesn't matter how long you've been doing this. I've been practicing tantric intimacy for a long time. And every time I make love, there's lots of communication. Well, I mean, not every time. Sometimes it's lovely and silent. But lots of times there's communication where it's like, actually, that's not feeling right today. Can we do it this way? Or can we shift this way? Right? Communication is everything. And we're not always mind readers. Sometimes we are, but we're not always. And a little bit of guidance, one way or the other, is so helpful and loving for your partner. So I'm going to put my glasses on. And if you have any questions at all, I would love to answer them. Why do women fake orgasms so much? Historically, we were taught to, right? We were taught to make sure that the man feels good about himself. Women were believed to not even enjoy sex. And because the sex actually wasn't any good, if she faked an orgasm, he probably would come sooner and it would be over, right? It's a great way to end sex. And the hard thing is if you're just having like kind of procreative sex, and if it isn't great, then if it isn't great, then you kind of know that it's not going to get any better, right? So that's a big part of it. Did I write down a list of what I wanted? I think so. Well, the thing is, like, I was really clear that I wanted a masculine partner, right? It was really clear that that's what I wanted. I didn't want to, and I didn't want to teach anybody either. I wanted someone who naturally wanted to give, who naturally wanted to be in that masculine role. And so even when I was on dating apps, if they didn't message first, I'd unmatch. If they didn't try to make a plan with me, I'd unmatch. If they didn't carry the conversation, I'd unmatch, because I was really clear that I only wanted a masculine partner and someone mature enough to actually be in that masculine role, right? I didn't want to play with a child. I wanted to actually play with someone who was all in and in that kind of adult space, you know? What about paying for dates? I never pay for dates. I mean, honestly, like if I'm dating someone, if I go out on a first date with someone and they don't offer to pay, it's the last date. That's it. And I don't go out. First of all, my first meeting with someone is a meeting. It's a coffee break. It's a coffee chat. Like it's a coffee. If they can't buy me a coffee, they sure as hell aren't going to buy anything later on, right? There's no chivalry there. And it's not about money. I don't care about money. I have the money. It's the energy of it. They're not in the masculine, right? And it's okay if they want to be in the feminine. And it's okay if they want to be even Steven with someone, because there'll be other people out there who love that, right? There's nothing wrong with it. I was desiring someone deep in the masculine. That's what I wanted. So if they didn't pay, they're not in their masculine. That's it. Like it was really, really easy. you know? So, what about feminine as energy versus dressing up in ways that are feminine? How does that factor into this? You've said we don't have to be pretty, but I guess I am genuinely wondering if it helps. So, my sense of whether or not being pretty or masculine for that case, right? Is someone attractive physically as a masculine, or are they attractive physically as a feminine? I remember reading a book called The High School Reunion Diet. And it was written by this guy who was a plastic surgeon. And he said, and he and his other friends who were also plastic surgeons, they asked, they were talking about what's the number one reason that people come for Botox for the first time? And the number one reason they come for Botox for the first time is because they have a high school reunion coming up. And so they, of course, would inject things into people's faces, men and women, but mostly women, to try to look younger. But then eventually he realized that, I don't know, he went on a diet or something. And he changed his diet, and he started getting off of sugar and coffee and all these kind of things. And all of a sudden, he started looking younger. But not only did he look younger, he moved his body differently. His body became supple. His body became flowing when they walked. And he realized that if we wanted to de-age and we wanted to look younger, we had to change our diet. It didn't matter how much Botox or how many lifts we had in our face. It actually was the food we were eating. And do we exercise? And do we get enough sleep? And are we stressed out or not? True attractiveness is everything to do with whether or not we're healthy. So whether we're pretty or we're very masculine looking has a lot more to do with our general fitness. And I don't mean, are you skinny or strong or have big pectoral muscles? I mean, are you youthful? Do you move easily? And again, not just physical, emotionally. Are you contracted emotionally? This is very unattractive. No matter how you did your hair, how much makeup you have on, if you literally are sending off skunk vibes because you're so emotionally terrified or so traumatized, it doesn't matter what you put on your face. If you are some big, buff gym rat, but you literally are a jerk, or you have emotional issues or whatever, you're unattractive. And this is one of the biggest shifts in the whole tantric world, is that energy doesn't lie. And it's funny, like in yoga, in Kundalini yoga, they talk about the 10 bodies. And one of the bodies, like the bodies, the mind, the physical, all that kind of thing, right? But one of the bodies is called the radiant body. And what they say is that the radiant body is actually what people see. That we think we spend all this time in front of the mirror trying to do this to our faces or our bodies or whatever. But that's actually not even what people see. We see people's radiant bodies, right? That is what we have to cultivate. We actually have to be happy. We actually have to be excited about being alive. That is the prettiest thing in the world. When our eyes glisten because we're happy, when we laugh easily, when we're easy to get along with, that is attractive. And it doesn't matter how pretty we are. It's a really, really big deal. But that's what I would say. It's always amazing to me when I meet someone and they're really alive. Like, you know what I mean? They're really alive. If someone was to say to me, are they good looking? I'd probably just say yes. But then you sort of look at them like with the eyes of Hollywood and you go, well, I mean, they're not like Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie good looking, but they're really attractive. And you even think of the word attractive, that it's magnetic, like their energy draws you to them. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking. Well, thanks, guys. This has been great. And we have a whole series of talks on here all about Tantra and intimacy and sex and stuff and fun stuff. If you want to dive deeper, definitely check out these two books, Tantric Intimacy and Divine Union of the Masculine Feminine. Head over to my website, katrinaboss.ca, katrinaboss.ca, and you can find all kinds of courses and other books and live events to join in. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you to everyone who's here live. It's so wonderful to have you here. It feels like being here with friends. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.